Joining us now from Singapore is the Chief ASEAN Economist of Nomura Securities, Euben Paracuelles. Good to see you, Euben. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
Right. You know, the BSP governor himself, Eli Remolona, last Friday signaled the triple R cut before the April 3 policy meeting. What do you make of that statement, and in what way does that impact your trajectory of the rate cuts that will happen throughout this year?
Yeah, so I think that's a credible commitment. This is an economy that still needs a little bit of support from all policy fronts, including from the central bank. So after they paused, I think there's a little bit of a change in the sequencing. Might be a little bit of a preference to inject liquidity via the triple R cuts, which they've already done in October. I think they're doing more. And I think what that does really is, it improves the policy transmission of later policy rate cuts, which I still expect for the rest of the year, given a very benign inflation outlook. So the BSP can actually focus a little bit more on supporting the economy with all of these tools. And I think the sequencing here is pretty important because, triple R cuts and then policy rate cuts improve the transmission towards lending rates, and therefore a bit more supportive in terms of the overall feed through to the economy. So, yeah, I still think the triple R cut, which the government talked about, could be front-loaded a little bit. I think April is a good window because obviously we have the elections coming in early May, and that means liquidity conditions could tighten. So some of that triple R cuts could counter that increase in liquidity demand.
Yeah, Euben, the governor in that same interview talked about how the Monetary Board is coming to grips with what it sees as global policy uncertainty. Let's listen to this.
The biggest factor, Kathy, is what we would call global policy uncertainty. We can measure that, and that has spiked in the last few weeks. So we're trying to put that into our models, and it's not easy because it's a big model, and we actually look at more than one model. We look at 3 models, and so we're trying to figure out how to do it. I'm sure other central banks are doing the same thing, and we're going to be comparing notes with other central banks. But we should have a better understanding of what's going on by the time of the next policy meeting.
So what do you make of it? The Bangko Sentral's use of multiple models to suss out what Trump's rhetoric may mean for global supply chains and the cost of capital?
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle for not just BSP, but a lot of central banks in terms of taking into account the implications of the U.S. tariffs under Trump 2.0. And I think this is going to be a persistent type of uncertainty. We will never really get a good handle of it. I think sometimes it's better to be just reactive than proactive, just because of the extent of the uncertainty. I would say that, if it was the reason for the BSP to hold back a little bit in terms of their cutting cycle at the previous meeting, to me that sounds a little bit puzzling because, the uncertainty in itself is the one that's going to create some downside pressure and growth, right? Whether it's weighing on business sentiment and other indirect channels. So we've seen that in some of the work that we've done before. And more importantly, we've already seen this in the first Trump administration. So, it's not that difficult to kind of think about the risks and how they play out as and when we get some of these tariffs announced by President Trump. So, to me, it's a downside risk to growth, and therefore it's not a reason to pause. It's actually a reason to keep cutting.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for your views there. Euben Paracuelles joining us from Singapore.